In this session, we'll be talking about sourcing your Amazon products from Vietnam. And Vietnam is becoming popular destination or place where you can get suppliers and find factories to produce your goods. It's a perfect alternative to China, and because there are few issues with China as well in the recent years and months. Let's listen to what our guests, two ladies from India Sourcing Trip, has to say. And before I continue, I wanted to introduce Lisette, which is hosting this session today. So hello, Lisette.
Hi, Augustus. Really happy to be here today to host a very interesting webinar because I think Amazon sellers don't know enough about sourcing from Vietnam. So I would like to invite Meghla and Margaret from Indian Sourcing Trip. And before we start with everything today, first we would love to hear a bit about your background and maybe describe a little bit how do you organize sourcing trips to Vietnam and also to India.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Augustas and Lisette, for having us here. So, yeah, I'm Meghla, and I'm based in India. I've got over 20 years of experience sourcing products, and I've been working in the sourcing industry for over 20 years. I worked in India, then the Philippines, China, Singapore, and now I'm back in India. So in 2019, we started organizing India Sourcing Trip because there was this trade war going on between China and the US, and Amazon e-commerce sellers started looking for alternatives to China. That's when we started India Sourcing Trip. And in fact, the next trip is happening just next week. In case anyone wants to sign up, we still have time for that. And then our audience started asking for Vietnam because Vietnam is a great alternative to sourcing from China. And so we started Vietnam Sourcing Trip, and the first one is going to be held in April. Mag?
Yes. Yeah, well, I'm actually Meghla's co-founder and partner in this little sort of whole gig. And starting back and getting through COVID, I suppose, we managed to stay online and promote India. And since then, we're back on the circuit with trips, and I'm actually selling on Amazon. I've been selling from India actually from 2017, I think, and previous to that, China. And and so now we're moving into Vietnam as well, which will be fantastic. I've been there and travelled extensively, and it's a fantastic place with great products. So looking forward to getting back into the factories over there.
Sounds really good. Actually, I already have a lot of questions in my head, what I would like to ask you about comparing Vietnam to India and India to China. But I know you prepared the presentation to cover the most important things Amazon sellers should know, and which will help them to understand if Vietnam would be a good sourcing country for them. So we also have your presentation here. So Meghla, I think you will start with it, right?
Yes, I'm going to start. All right, so let's get started. So let me just see. Did the slide change? Okay, yeah. So these are the topics that we're going to be covering today. First of all, we want to give an overview of sourcing from Vietnam. And then we want to talk about why you should consider sourcing from Vietnam. And then most importantly, Vietnam versus China. And then we're also going to cover product categories that you can source, how to find suppliers. And lastly, we'll talk about our upcoming Vietnam sourcing trip. Okay, so first of all, Vietnam exports overview. Now, this is important to sort of give people an idea of where Vietnam stands in terms of global exports. And if you look at this chart, from 2011 onwards, Vietnam's exports have been consistently increasing. And in 2021, overall exports were $371 billion, which is, of course, significantly lower than China's exports, which is in the trillions of dollars, but it's still growing, and it's one of the top export markets in the world. So overall exports have continued to grow from Vietnam. Now, in terms of export markets, the United States is the biggest export partner for Vietnam with almost 30% of export share, followed by China, then South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, and then all of the different countries, Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, Netherlands, Cambodia. So Vietnam has a very varied kind of exports to different types of, all different types of countries. So I think that's pretty interesting. And a lot of the sellers, who are watching this video, or a lot of Amazon sellers, usually sell on Amazon.com. And so that is, one of the main export markets of Vietnam. Also, if you look at Vietnam exports by product category, it's very interesting to see, of course, the top category is electrical machinery. And this also includes things like electronics and a lot of the, engineering goods, which, of course, Amazon e-commerce sellers are not really interested in. But the other categories are like footwears, and these includes things like shoes, sandals, boots, gaiters. Vietnam has really emerged as one of the top production hubs for footwear. And it all started with big companies like Nike and Adidas setting up factories in Vietnam. And then once the supply chain sort of developed, there were other smaller factories that came up that were doing OEM orders for global importers. And there are a lot of China invested factories in Vietnam as well, which has really helped boost production in Vietnam at a fast pace, because all of these Chinese factories are bringing their know-how, their technology, their production processes into Vietnam. And then there's other categories like clothing accessories knitted. So these are all like garments and accessories. Nuclear reactors. Well, I don't think we're going to be sourcing nuclear reactors. At least I hope not. Furniture and bedding. It's really interesting to see how Vietnam has emerged as one of the top manufacturers and export markets of furniture. And I have a few slides to show on this later on. Fish and other types of food items, edible fruit and nuts, optical photography, and plastics. Vietnam is in fact a great alternative to sourcing plastic products that maybe are not that cost effective to source in countries like India. So if you're sourcing any type of plastic product that is, like sunglasses or containers, for example, for storage, things like that, Vietnam is a great alternative to China for that. All right, so why should you consider sourcing from Vietnam? The number one reason is low labor costs. So if you see this chart over here, China's labor costs overall have been increasing. And in 2020, they were around $6.5 per hour. Whereas Vietnam is still kind of relatively low. So if there's any product that requires labor, that's labor intensive, it will be lower to produce in general in Vietnam. Of course, there are other factors to consider as well, whether or not the raw materials are imported from China or if they are available locally, how automated the process is. But overall, things like garments, shoes, where there is labor required and they're sort of low value items, those are quite cost effective to produce in Vietnam. Also bags and backpacks, that's a huge category too. And a lot of Amazon e-commerce sellers that we know are sourcing bags and backpacks from Vietnam. Another advantage is that Vietnam has a large, well-educated labor force. Now, of course, the overall population of Vietnam is much, much lower than the populations of China or even India. But 95% of the labor force is literate. Almost 57% of the population is in the labor force. And the labor force is generally younger than it is in China. And the government is also emphasizing a lot of vocational and technical training for factory workers and other technicians and other professions that are related to manufacturing. So the government has been really pushing for enhancement in education in terms of that's related to the manufacturing industry. This is a really big deal because Vietnam has a lot of free trade agreements with various countries, and this is one of the reasons that has helped propel Vietnam's exports. So Vietnam is a signatory to 18 active and planned free trade agreements with the EU, with UK, with the US, with India, and a lot of different countries. And with China, as we know, there's this geopolitical tension between China and the West that sort of results in a bit of unpredictability in the supply chain, whereas Vietnam is seen as more friendly towards the West. And so there are fewer disruptions in the supply chain when you're sourcing from Vietnam. Another advantage and another thing that we're seeing is that Vietnam, the government is really investing in manufacturing. There are fewer restrictions on foreign direct investment. There are a lot of factories that are set up, by Chinese companies or by Japanese, Korean, and they are, bringing their know-how, their technology, and this technology transfer is really helping develop the overall industries in Vietnam. Overall, in 2022, Vietnam saw an FDI of 25 billion plus. And there are a lot of tax incentives that the government is also giving to local and overseas companies to set up factories. There are also different high-tech zones, industrial zones, socioeconomic areas that are encouraged to, develop the manufacturing industries. And there's certain industries that are that the government is focusing on, such as the high-tech sector, textiles, garments, IT, automobiles, etc. So the government is really pushing for manufacturing to, develop in Vietnam. Okay, so Vietnam versus China. Now let's talk about the Vietnam pros, overall. So as we mentioned, there's low labor cost in Vietnam. That is one big advantage. And one of the main reasons why big companies started looking to produce in Vietnam, because China's production costs have been increasing over the years. And not only are the labor costs increasing, but overall production costs, including the rents, for example, or property prices, or raw material costs. So overall production costs have been increasing. And this is why a lot of the companies, the bigger companies, have moved out to low cost production areas such as Vietnam, Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, and specific industries like apparel, footwear. These have really diversified into these other low cost production hubs. And then, as we mentioned, Vietnam has a lot of FTAs with many countries, whereas China does not. Vietnam has good relations with the US and Europe, and so the supply chain is a little bit more stable, a little bit more predictable. Whereas in China, there's geopolitical tensions between the West and China, and at times, it seems like we just need a little bit of a spark to set this fire ablaze between China and the West. There even been talks about, what happens if China would invade Taiwan, for example. I mean, that would really cause a lot of disruption in supply chains. And so a lot of the bigger brands and companies, importers globally, are looking to diversify their supply chain so that they're not stuck in a situation, where if there's if the relationship between the West and China deteriorates further. Another big advantage is that there are no trade tariffs for products that are imported into the US. And this is one of the main reasons why companies started looking for alternative markets when the Trump tariffs were implemented in US imports. Whereas in China, there are still high trade tariffs that on certain products that are imported into the US. So sometimes, even though your production cost in Vietnam may be higher for certain products because the raw material might need to be imported, but if you look at the overall landed cost, including duties and taxes, then the overall landed cost is sometimes lower than China. Also, Vietnam is, market share of certain categories is increasing. For example, furniture and shoes. And I'll show some charts on these that are quite interesting. Whereas in China, even though China is the world's main factory and it will remain the world's main production hub for many years to come, but certain categories, China's market share has been decreasing over the last few years because a lot of companies are diversifying and looking for other lower cost alternatives. So China's market share is overall decreasing. And over the next few years, what's going to happen is, even though China will remain the main production hub, there'll be other countries that develop as production hubs. And you'll see that the sourcing becomes a lot more fragmented. What are the China pros? One of the disadvantages of sourcing from Vietnam is that there's a limited product range. In China, it's not a matter of if a product is produced, it's basically a question of how much can it be produced for, because China has really developed its supply chain very significantly and can produce anything and everything. Also in Vietnam, the infrastructure is quite good, but of course, China has better infrastructure than most countries in Asia. One of the disadvantages of Vietnam is that a lot of the materials and components still need to be imported from China. Although that is changing, we are seeing more fabric mills being set up, for example, or other factories and companies that are making the raw materials. But as of now, most materials need to be imported from China. And so sometimes that can add to lead times. Sometimes that can add to costs. That's something to consider. Whereas in China, most materials and components are available locally. Okay, so this is a very interesting chart that I think is kind of an indication of the overall trends in the sourcing industry globally. So if you look at this chart, it shows the export market share of China in different categories over the years. So in clothing and accessories, China's market share in 2016 was 41%, and in 2022, it has gone down to 37%. In furniture, China's market share was 64% in 2016, and that has gone down to 53% in 2022. Footwear from 72% to 65%. Travel goods and bags, 83% to 70%. So overall, the share has been decreasing, even though the actual export value may or may not have decreased, but the share in global exports has decreased. This is another product category now this is for Vietnam, sorry. So let's look at Vietnam. From 2016 to 2022 for furniture. In 2016, Vietnam's export share was 8%, and it has increased to 17% in 2022. It is more than doubled. Footwear from 12% in 2016 to 16% in 2022. Travel goods, 6% to 10%. So overall, in these key categories, we can see that Vietnam's share has significantly increased. In fact, for furniture, Vietnam was the top exporter in the world in 2020, beating China as well. Vietnam's exports were 33%, whereas China's was 32%. So Vietnam actually beat China in terms of export market share. In 2021, both countries were even. Both countries had about 31%. And 2022, Vietnam is expected to take the lead again by a small margin. But it's really fascinating to me that a small country like Vietnam has been able to overtake China, like this massive, gigantic production hub that is really manufacturing products for each and every country in the world. But Vietnam has been able to overtake China in manufacturing of furniture, throughout the world. So, I mean, that in itself is an indication of how fast manufacturing is improving and the level of, how advanced manufacturing is in Vietnam. Okay, so for this, I'm going to pass it on to Margaret, and Margaret is going to talk about the product categories that you can source in Vietnam.
Thank you, Meghla. Now, quickly, we'll start with clothing and textiles. Now, there's $45 billion of exports in 2022, up from $40.4 million in 2021. So the annual growth has gone up by 20 to 26%, which is 5.2% of the global market. The third largest textile exporter in the world now is Vietnam, which is really surprising. And it exports to the US, South Korea, Japan, Europe, the biggest importers of those products. Suppliers focusing on eco-friendly practices such as reducing recycle and waste. So they're actually starting to become very sort of conscious of the eco world now. Most fabric, though, is imported from China or Taiwan to be manufactured into garments. So as Meghla said, they don't manufacture a lot of the raw materials in Vietnam as yet. And the types of clothing you can get is obviously sportswear, t-shirts, socks, casual wear, uniforms, outerwear, formal wear, underwear, ready-made, garments, yarns, textiles, technical fabrics and labels. And I think you'll find now if you start looking on your clothing, you'll see I find a lot of my t-shirts and things are made in Vietnam. So it is a bit of a change from having them all made in China. So next slide, please, Meghla. Now, footwear. Vietnam is really big on footwear, and I can actually attest to that. I've had some shoes made when I was there last time, and I'm planning to try and get some more made on my trip over there in April. So looking forward to that. And my shoes are still going a few years down the track, I might add. I wear them constantly. Now, the footwear in Vietnam is 23.8 billion of exports in 2022 compared to 17.8 in 2021. And 90% of the shoes that are produced in Vietnam are actually exported. 16% of the global export market share, which is, quite high considering its size. There's 2,200 factories, mostly around Ho Chi Minh City. Nike and Adidas have got their main production base there. And you can get anything from, flip-flops, sandals, leather luxury shoes, sneakers, boots. So virtually any shoes you want. And they do make, they're really nice quality shoes. When I've been over there and we've been and had a look before, there's some great shoes made. Okay, wooden furniture. That's really a big market. And I find here in Australia, there are lots of, I suppose, warehouse type sales that just sell furniture imported from Vietnam. People have made it into quite a big business here. So in 2022, 16.5 billion was exported compared to 14.5 in 2021. 4.4% of the products exported from the country is furniture. So it's, slowly growing with that sort of in that niche. 17% of global export market share is in furniture. There's 70 to 80% of the materials are imported, though, to make the furniture. It's obviously number one, and as Meghla said, number two. It's hopefully going to come back and be number one again this year in the world. So that's quite a feat. And the main export markets go to the US, UK, China, Japan, and South Korea. And the types of furniture they make is home, office, hospitality, outdoor, and they just make some stunning things like dining tables and chairs and things like that. They've got some really great products. Electronics and electrical equipment. And that's obviously something that we probably won't be looking at buying if we're an Amazon seller. It's probably a little bit of a bigger niche to get into, but it's interesting to look at the facts. There's $131 billion in exports in 2021. Companies like Samsung, Intel, Foxconn, and LG have significant factories. And the types of electronics you can get are phones, PCs, laptops, TVs, cameras, etc. And some domestic brands are coming up. Most are produced by MNCs. Now, plastic and rubber, that's something that's really good. I think if you're actually using plastics from Vietnam as your using the China as your sourcing base, it's a good place to look to move to Vietnam for plastics. And there's 5 billion annual exports of rubber and plastic goods a year. Mostly basic plastic consumer goods such as like rubber dog toys, home products, sunglasses. So virtually anything that's sort of, plastic home goods is really prevalent over there. And the most common method is plastic injection, but you can find other methods, including extrusion and some welding. Now, rubber manufacturers offer extrusion, latex dipping, molding, and coloring. And so, Vietnam is really a great option for you to look at. And, even not completely move if you're sourcing from China, have it as your alternative, have it as your backup. So you've got, your sort of suppliers ready to go if need be, down the track. Packaging. Now, I've seen someone ask about paper products. Yeah, packaging is very big. So paper products are quite prevalent in Vietnam. So 1.7 billion annual exports of packaging, and you can get cardboard boxes made, your packing cartons and all that, or just your normal packaging for your stock, soda cans, plastic packaging, etc. And you can get packaging for your food and beverages, cosmetics, pharmaceutical bottling and beverages, barcoding, printing, and they do labeling. So there's an opportunity, and obviously if you want something else made out of paper, they can do that because they're doing everything else in paper and cardboard. Now, this is probably, I think, what Vietnam is really famous for is their bamboo and rattan products, and they do that really well, and there's some awesome products made over there. There's $474 million in exports in 2019. And made out of rattan, they do, baskets, furniture, storage containers, handicrafts, toys, wall hangings, chairs, ottomans. So that'll be, we'll probably do 2 or 3 of those factories while we're over there, and get some really great ideas for some Amazonable products, I think, at that in that niche. Now, the more products they make, you can get iron and steel. They do construction, coffee, seafood as well. Next slide, please. Now, finding suppliers. It's a little more difficult, I think, to find suppliers in Vietnam for people starting out. There is Alibaba has a Vietnam tab. If you can click on that, you'll find a few suppliers for Vietnam there. Global Sources have a site with suppliers on it, and we're actually attending the Global Sources fair when we're over in Vietnam. They're actually having their first fair, so we're visiting that fair. There's Vietnam Export, Vietnam Manufacturer, and Vietnamese Made. Now, I find these are a little bit harder to find your way around. They're just a bit of a clunky sort of sites, the last 3. Now, associations, another way you can find them is by different associations. There's Vietnam Textile and Apparel Association, the Vietnam Rubber Association, Vietnam Footwear, Leather and Handbag Association, or Vietnam Electronics Industries. So you just need to be a little bit more inventive and sort of search around the web a little bit more, I think, when you're looking. Now, so as I said before, Global Sources Fair is starting that in April. It's its first fair, and it's for gifts, home, fashion, and it's all focused on international exports. The Vietnam International Furniture and Home Accessories Expo, that's very large. The Vietnam International Textile and Apparel and Accessories Exhibition, and they do, fabrics, garments and accessories. And there's also Processing and Packaging Exhibition and Conference. The largest packaging exhibition focuses on packaging and machinery. You'll find that Vietnam, funnily enough, when you search for fairs coming up in Vietnam, there's one almost every week. Not all of them are export focused, but there's virtually a fair within any product you can think of. There are fairs. So if you wanted that information, you can look those up as well. So now there's many local and foreign sourcing agencies in Vietnam. Some of the sourcing agents charge a flat fee, and some charge a percentage of your order value. So you just need to decide which way you want to go if you're going to do that, whether you're looking for someone with a flat fee or whether you prefer to pay a percentage of your order value, depending obviously on the size of the order as well would influence that. Now, we can actually help you with one of the sourcing agents we use over there. Oh, it's on the next slide, I think. So there's to source products and also manage QCs. We have both of those in place.
Thanks a lot for that, Mark. So we'll just go over Vietnam sourcing trip, and then we'll take any questions that you might have. So Vietnam sourcing trip is a 10-day immersive tour to Vietnam. And the focus during this trip is basically to help you understand how sourcing in Vietnam works and to visit a number of factories. We're going to be going to 3 different cities. We'll start in Hanoi, and then we go to Da Nang, and then we end the trip in Ho Chi Minh City. So it's a 10-day trip, but we also have a shorter version in case you don't want to do the entire 10-day trip and you want to focus mostly on visiting factories in Ho Chi Minh City. We also have a 5-day option for a Vietnam sourcing trip. That is, of course, a lower cost, and it also does not include some of the cultural activities that we are doing. So what are some of the benefits of attending a sourcing trip like this? First of all, you're going to be visiting pre-qualified factories in Vietnam. And, a lot of the factories in Vietnam, they ask for high MOQs. That is one of the challenges that Amazon e-commerce sellers will face when they source from Vietnam, because many of these factories have very large setups and they're not set up to do small orders. But there are factories that do small orders, and our team is going out and finding these factories that can cater to smaller orders as well. We're also creating a network of all different types of service providers that you might need when you start sourcing from Vietnam. So we'll be introducing you to sourcing agents, freight forwarders, quality control companies, lawyers, all of these experts. You'll, of course, be able to see thousands of home, gift, and fashion products at the Global Sources Fair, which is really export focused, and the product categories are relevant for Amazon e-commerce sellers. Now, almost every day we'll have mastermind sessions in the evenings, and we'll also have information sessions with various sourcing and e-commerce experts that are joining us on the trip. You'll also be able to learn from different brands that are already buying products from Vietnam, and there are 7-figure seller Amazon sellers that are actually sourcing all of their products from Vietnam that are going to be with us on the trip as well. You'll be able to understand the cultural differences and what pitfalls to avoid. And best of all, you'll be able to enjoy Vietnam's scenic beauty, because we are including a couple of cultural activities during this trip as well. We'll be visiting Ha Long Bay. And in fact, we'll be spending one night on a boat in this beautiful Ha Long Bay, and we'll also be visiting other tourist spots. And of course, we'll also be savoring some of the delicious food that Vietnam has to offer in all of the different restaurants that we'll be having meals in. So just to give you an idea of the itinerary, we start in Hanoi on April 19th. We do a half-day conference in Hanoi to give you an overview of how sourcing in Vietnam works. We'll have various experts do presentations. Then we'll do factory visits in Hanoi. We'll have networking, drinks, and dinner on multiple days. In fact, on most days, drinks are included with the networking dinners. Then we'll have information sessions in Hanoi as well, and overnight on a boat in Ha Long Bay. And then we fly to Da Nang on the 22nd, where we do more factory visits. We have information sessions throughout the trip. We go to Hoi An local market. This is a really interesting market that has thousands of little shops where you can get an idea of the different types of products that Vietnam can make. And most of these products are the handicraft kind of products like cane, wood. All of these are made by artisans, and sometimes these products can also be sourced and sold on Amazon, and they do quite well. And then, of course, we have more networking, drinks, and dinner in Da Nang as well, and a cultural show. Then we fly to Ho Chi Minh City on the 24th. We do more factory visits over there. In fact, we have 2 full days of factory visits in Ho Chi Minh City, and then we spend 1 day at the trade show, the Global Sources Trade Show. We do a street walk in the Bintan markets, and then we end the entire trip with the Saigon River dinner cruise. So in case you don't want to attend the entire trip, you also have the option of only attending the Ho Chi Minh City part of the trip, and for that you'll have to arrive in Ho Chi Minh on the 24th, and then the trip will end for you on the 28th. So you'll do factory visits plus trade show in Ho Chi Minh City. So this basically
Meghla
excludes some of the cultural activities. Yeah.
Yeah, Meghla, I actually wanted to ask about the factory visit. So can you give us a brief overview? How does it look like? Are you going together to the factory? What will you do there, or what sellers can see there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be visiting the factories, and the factory owners or the managers are going to walk us around the factory to, first of all, introduce the company, talk about the products that they manufacture, and then they'll also be showing us the production process. Whenever you're sourcing from any market, it really helps to understand the production process so that you know what to look out for in terms of quality issues. Once you understand the production process, you'll be able to say that, okay, maybe I can change the production process over here a little bit to save on some costs, or you might say that I have to be more aware of QC issues in this step of the process because for whatever reason. So understanding the production process is really, really important to be able to manage costs and quality. So that's what we're going to do at the factory visits, basically.
Yeah, sounds really good, and thank you for giving us a little bit more of the details.
Yeah. And then some people might also want to start sourcing products, because all of these factories will have a showroom and where they display different samples of the products that they produce. And so, you'll be able to actually sit down and talk about pricing and source some of these products as well. So here are some of the experts that are joining us on the trip. We've got Jim Kennemer, who's a sourcing expert. He has a sourcing agency in Vietnam, and he's been helping all kinds of brands and importers source products from Vietnam for over 7 or 8 years. We've got Ben Leonard, who's a 7-figure seller. He's exited his own brand a couple of years ago. He currently runs a company called Ecom Brokers, and he's now developing his new brand that is being sourced entirely from Vietnam. And so Ben is really an amazing person to learn from. I mean, he's just so giving with his information and value. And, he can not only teach you how to source from Vietnam, how to deal with suppliers, but also how to grow a brand in order to exit it. We've got Prasanna, who is from RSJ Inspection. Now, RSJ Inspection is our recommended QC company in India, and they also provide services in Vietnam. So they're going to be there with their local Vietnam team to talk about, what are the pitfalls that you need to avoid in terms of quality control. We've got Samiksha Sachdeva, who's a logistics expert, and her company Sea Air provides logistics services from India as well as from Vietnam. They have a team in Vietnam too, and she's already helping sellers in our community ship products from Vietnam. We've got CJ Rosenbaum, who's from Amazon Sellers Lawyer. We've got Kathy Lloyd, who's an e-commerce coach from Australia, and she is starting to source from Vietnam, and she's really good with helping people select products to sell on Amazon. We've got Lynn Sundin, who's a 7-figure seller who sources all of her products from Vietnam. For many years, she's been working with Vietnamese suppliers. She's visited Vietnam quite a few times, worked with suppliers very closely. So she has a wealth of information about sourcing from Vietnam, and she's made all of the mistakes that you would make when you start sourcing from a country. So it'll be really interesting to learn from her experiences and her mistakes. And then we've got Jeff Schick, who is from Jeff Schick Legal as well. And there are more experts that will be announced. So that is the end of our presentation. In case anyone is interested to sign up, you can go to vietnamsourcingtrip.com to get more information. Don't forget to use the code OrangeClick for $300 off. And if you do want to explore the shorter version of the trip, you can write an email to us at info@vietnamsourcingtrip.com, and we'll share more information for on that option as well. And over here is a picture of Ha Long Bay. This is the type of boat that we'll be on. It's called a junk boat, and this is a really nice and scenic area where we're going to be spending a night. And of course, doing a lot of mastermind sessions and learning as well. All right, Lisette, so that's it from me for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Meghla, and also Margaret, thank you as well. Everything seems very interesting, and all of the links are also in the description of the video if somebody wants to learn more and also sign up for the trip. And before, we also have some questions for you about today's topic. But before that, I wanted to say thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us, and also everybody watching us live. Don't forget to like this video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel to see more videos like this in the future. So actually, first I will ask my own question, which is related to, I think, one of the very first slides you had about different goods usually are exported from Vietnam. So in that graph, it was shown that electronic goods are one of the top exported goods. So I wanted to ask, why is that so? And I think it was like very, very high, like on the top.
Yeah. And the main reason for that is because a lot of the big companies like Samsung, LG, Foxconn, these companies have set up their massive factories in Vietnam. And this has happened, over the last few years. It's not something recent, but all of these factories are always looking for lower production centers. And so Vietnam has really emerged as a low production center, over the last few years. And that's one of the main reasons. Currently, you won't find a lot of, OEM kind of electronic suppliers in Vietnam. Like, for example, in China, if you go to Shenzhen city, every third company manufactures things like, power banks and charging cables, and you can just pick up power banks and put your label on them, and they'll have catalogs with hundreds and hundreds of designs that you can private label for yourself. But that is not something that you'll find in Vietnam currently. Mostly, it's the big MNCs that are producing products there and exporting to different markets in Asia or even to the West, or supplying to the domestic market. But gradually, once the supply chain develops, then we will see other smaller mid-sized companies also developing and doing OEM orders. And that has already started to happen. We are seeing some of the smaller, local Vietnamese owned companies starting up and doing things like headphones and power banks, etc., OEM production.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's take another question from the viewers. So do you have any additional insights when it comes to paper products?
So paper products, there's a lot of different options available. There's packaging. Packaging is one of the top categories of products. So it really depends on what type of product you're looking for, Dell. I mean, paper products is a very broad category, but in general, packaging is available. There's printing paper, for example, if you're looking for those kinds of things, envelopes, calendars, notebooks, those kinds of products are available.
So the same viewer actually has more questions for you. So let's talk a little bit about the logistics. So can you give us any insights about logistic cost and also the estimated time of arrival? Let's say when sellers would order products from Vietnam to either send to North America or Australia.
For North America, in terms of the costs, it's relatively comparative to China. So currently, for example, a 40-foot is around $4,000 or so from Vietnam to the West Coast. And in terms of timing, it takes around, I think, around 20 days or so sailing time. So the time is not too long as well. From Vietnam to the West Coast. I'm not really sure about Australia, Vietnam to Australia. I'm not really sure about that, but because we mostly, deal with Vietnam to America, and so that's what we are really familiar with. So yeah, I mean, you have to find the right logistics partner, especially somebody. If you're shipping into Amazon FBA, you've got to make sure that the service provider or freight forwarder understands that. And also, if you're not based in the US, you want to make sure that the company can, handle all of the documentation that is required, and they can be your consignee and all of those things, and that they understand how to ship products into FBA. That's really important to do.
Okay, so Ash is asking, what about VAs, virtual assistants? Is there opportunities to engage with and recruit Amazon sourcing VAs like you can find within Philippines, for example?
Amazon sourcing VAs. Yeah, you might be able to find sourcing agents that you can engage with. But one of the problems with Vietnam is that a lot of people don't speak English very fluently. I think that's one big advantage that the Philippines has, and why the whole VA industry has really developed there, because they're really good with English. But Vietnam, even when you visit factories, you might need translators. So, but yeah, you might be able to find independent sourcing agents that can help you with the sourcing.
And just something on the sorry, Lizette. On the trip, we actually have an interpreter traveling with us and as a guide for the whole trip. So if we go anywhere and you're finding that the factory staff you want to talk to can't speak English, we have got people on board with us to help you out in any situations, because it is a little bit different, and it's very hard to understand. You can't work it out what they're saying if you can't speak the language.
Yeah, okay. And actually, as Meghla mentioned already, the sourcing agents, then do you have any recommendations how sellers could find sourcing agents to have additional help with finding the factories, but also communicating with them? Because, as we now know, their English might not be so good, so a little help is needed.
Yeah, so I think finding a sourcing agent, you probably just use Google and search for sourcing agent Vietnam. You should be able to find some, companies. We have a few agents that we have partnered with, and we have vetted. We know and trust them, so we can introduce you to them. And we also offer sourcing services if you want, help finding a supplier or managing quality. We can help with that as well.
Okay, and again, all of the links are in the description if you want to find out more or contact Meghla or Margaret. So let's take another question. So Ash wants to know, is there a minimum order quantity for samples of potential products?
Samples. So generally samples are just one or two. I mean, you don't have an MOQ for samples as such. You can do a trial order. That's something that you could consider, depending on the product, of course. Like if the product requires a mold, you can't really manufacture, 100 pieces and expect the price to be the same as, let's say, 5,000 pieces. But if the product does not have a mold, if it's something like an apparel or maybe a rattan basket or something like that, then suppliers are more flexible in terms of the order quantity because there's no, manufacturing setup, there's no mold setup required for that. So yeah, it really depends on the product, but in general, samples are just one or a few, and you can do a trial order, which may be a few hundred pieces to test products.
Yeah, and two, I think a lot of the, I suppose, handicraft type products are made in villages and not all in factories, and they're managed by a factory. So similar to what happens in India, there's a lot of like women's groups, disadvantaged people who are manufacturing in their homes or communities, and it goes into a factory to have the final processing done. And that's very prevalent in Vietnam, obviously, with the rattan and things like that. And also something we haven't touched on is ceramics. There's a huge ceramics village not far out of Hanoi, which we're hoping to do on the way back from Ha Long Bay. And that you would there find like a company that's selling it for all the artisans that work in the villages. So those types of things, you obviously can, get 50 or 100 pieces. But, as Meghla said, if you're looking for, a plastic bowl that's got to have a mold that's worth hundreds of dollars, you're not going to be able to get, 50 or 100 pieces of that very cost effective.
I'm actually very happy that you brought up the handicraft products because I want to ask a question. Let me hide the banner. About the product quality. So there was a question about inspection. Just a moment. So I want to show it to others too. So what would you say about when working with Vietnamese factories? Would you recommend ordering an inspection for every order? Basically, for example, if it's a handicrafted product, like how factories are able to ensure that the quality is always the same?
So, first of all, whether you're sourcing from Vietnam, from China, from India, you should do an inspection on every order. And the reason for this is things change at factories. I mean, I myself, have a factory that I'm involved in over here in India, and the person who's managing the assembly line might change. He might not understand your order. Or, in our case, what happened once that we had to change our raw material supplier because the current raw material supplier was not able to supply us the raw material, and we didn't realize it, but the new raw material supplier had some issues, but we couldn't see those issues until the product was finished and it went into the went into production. It was almost being packed and everything, and the issue was caught in inspection. So those kind of things do happen at factories. So you should definitely do inspections on every order. And for handicraft products, I think there are a couple of things. First of all, because they are handicraft products, some imperfections and some inconsistencies are expected. And that is also the uniqueness of handicraft products. Each product is a little bit unique. It's different. So that's something that you should communicate to your customers, whether on Amazon or your own website, that yes, these products are unique, and there may be some minor differences in terms of, maybe the size or colors or something, depending on the product. In terms of quality, but of course, you want to make sure that there are no quality issues. And even handicraft products, you can do quality inspections. It also helps to give suppliers an approved sample that they can follow. Don't just confirm everything by email or by writing in the contract, but give them an actual sample and highlight the things that you want them to take note of and to manage better. And I think that also really helps to actually give them an approved sample.
That's actually a very good idea. Haven't heard about that yet. So I think one of the last ones about paying factories. So Alibaba doesn't offer trade assurance for Vietnam. So what payment method is most secure?
Yeah, one of the things that you have to do when sourcing from Vietnam and all is to make sure that the company is trustworthy. It's a real company, and protect yourself as much as possible. The most common method of payment is by wire transfer, which is also known as TT or telegraphic transfer. And you generally don't pay the full amount in advance. Pay as less as possible as an upfront payment, maybe 30%. Sometimes suppliers may ask for 50% if it's your first order with them. And then make sure that you do an inspection and pay the rest after the inspection is cleared. So protect yourself as much as possible when you are sourcing from Vietnam.
Okay, sounds really good. Well, I hope the trips you will now organize. So the first one will be in India. It's already in March, right? And the next one will be in April in Vietnam. So maybe, quickly, can you once more share the main details when exactly both trips are being organized and what's the main goal for the sellers to participate?
Definitely. So the India trip is actually happening next week. We start on Monday. So it's just a few days from now, but there's still time to join us. I mean, all you need to do is book your ticket and get your flights and also get your visa, which is usually done within 24 to 48 hours. So there's still time to do that. In case there are any last minute takers, you can go to indiasourcingtrip.com and get more information. At the India trip, we visit a trade show where there are over 4,000 exhibitors of home products and gift products. Most of them are made from metal, wood, and other handicraft kind of items. And they're really beautiful, very unique products. We also do a conference where we teach you all about sourcing from India. And we introduce you to a lot of service providers, a lot of suppliers. And then, of course, we have some experts joining us, as well as mastermind sessions and information sessions in the evening as well. And our Vietnam sourcing trip is starting in April. So the dates are April 19th to the 28th. And you can get more information at vietnamsourcingtrip.com. There's also a code, Orange Click. Don't forget to use Orange Click for $300 off. And we also have a shorter version of the Vietnam trip in case you don't want to do the full version, which is a 5-day trip that is much cheaper as well.
Yeah, and also we're going back to India in October. So if you like to plan a little bit more ahead, it'll be probably about the 9th of October or something like that. We're back there again to the Delhi Fair, which happens twice a year, every year. From now on, no COVID.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Meghla, Margaret, Lisette. I wish it would have been Women's Day today, but it's one day later. And see you in India and Vietnam. Not me, but somebody else.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Augustus, Lisette, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
And now I would like to invite you to watch other video where, well, actually it's the whole playlist where we talk about different countries you can source your products from. So in this playlist, you will find videos about China, Vietnam, India. So check this out.